It would pass for a frenzied tantrum festival. Yes, your members of parliament were very angry today. Angry with the Auditor General, angry with the Controller of Budget, angry with the media, and who knows who else. So why the rage? The devil is in the details. We have a diagnosis of the Auditor General's report and specifically the findings and the state of the Social Health Authority and the Social Health Insurance Fund. And it is Lent season, the season of giving. There is 20 million shillings on the table, but a brewing storm elsewhere. Why are others not appreciating gifts? The Art of Giving is on the NEWSGANG and later on Jamila's memo. On Sam's Sense, what sense does it make for accountability to storm an accountability office to demand for accountability? Bonya's Bone picks a bone with a parliament that abhors accountability. Kaikai's kicker literally kicks football, kicking in for the next Harambee Stars coach, Benny McCarthy. On My Take, Cusco is a crime scene we must watch overnight. The NEWSGANG is here.
Kwa mitandao, hata mujaze makaseti, makaratasi na nini mara ngapi? Ati ndio mutulazimishe turudi nyuma kule kwa NHIF muendelee na kuiba? Haiwezekani.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. The hashtag is NEWSGANG at Citizen TV Kenya. It's good to see you all again this week. That's where things were before, but let's bring it back to present day. And there was quite some things that happened in Parliament this afternoon. There was quite a bit of anger. What happened, Jamila, in Parliament today?
I think Parliament today started discussing two very important offices, two very important women in this country. That is the Office of the Control of Budget and the Office of the Auditor General. And in the past few days, these two distinguished ladies have released reports that have caused quite a stir, especially the report from the Auditor General, Dr. Nancy Gathungu, on the 2023-2024 report on how money was spent and all that. And the one aspect of it that I think rattled probably those in government and even those who are speaking in Parliament today was what was said about the whole SHA system. Yeah. And of course, there are all these claims of what is that report released? Why was it released in public? What does it mean? And about the role of Parliament after the Auditor General releases her report. There are even claims that the Controller of Budget's office is corrupt, talking about how our governors have to go give something for them to get money that they need for projects in their counties. I think, Yvonne, we should listen to some of the bites, listen to Kimani Ichung'wah, right, talking about the Office of the Controller of Budget.
But the Office of the Controller of Budget needs to style up. Ask any governor in this country, they have to go through hell to get their monies approved for use in their counties by the Office of the Controller of Budget. And many will tell you, without parting with money, without paying bribes to officers in that office, governors never get justice. Across the country, governors and county governments are suffering because of inefficiencies and corruption in the Office of the Controller of Budget. But because they're independent offices, they imagine if anyone speaks about them, the whole world will come crumbling down, saying, oh, you're attacking independent offices.
And he was not the only one. Let's listen to the minority leader, Junaid Mohammed, speaking on the same issue.
You know, the Controller of Budget, Mr. Speaker, is supposed to check whether the expenditures that are being incurred by the county government and the national government are in tandem with the budget that has been approved by Parliament, period. But now, every county government must seek the approval of the Controller of Budget for any expenditure. If they want to build a dam, he must go to the control of budget and ask her, can I build this dam or not? Then there is a lot of corruption. The other day, the auditor, the control of budget reported that the government, the national government, spent 1.3 trillion manual without passing through our office, Mr. Speaker. And he said that money was supposed to be spent electronically.
Before we discuss the accuracy of what exactly he's saying, they were not done. They also went on and talked about the Auditor General and criticized her and the report that she released. Let's listen again to Junaid Mohammed.
Parliament is now supposed to verify whether the audit report is correct or not correct. Until that is done, Mr. Speaker, and a report is tabled before the Assembly of the House, before the plenary of the House, Mr. Speaker, that audit is not confirmed, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, any audit report is a confirmed report before it is audited, before it is brought before the House. Mr. Speaker, that culture will lead to anarchy. That culture will lead to people's names being destroyed, Mr. Speaker, without any recourse.
So according to the Leader of Minority, the audit report has to be confirmed by Parliament. Yeah. And we are forgetting that for that audit report to be released and for it to be even written and everything that's contained in it is after documents have been given to the Auditor General's office that she's requested from government offices, state corporations, and all those. That's what ends up being contained in the audit report.
But
then
Jamila,
now
there's
when
something that made them angry, because there is something that precipitated this near frothing of the mouth in Parliament.
Yes.
And this is all to do with
what the
state of the Social Health Authority.
Yes.
Jamila, you did a report on this.
Yes. Gituku
yours was story number 1. Let's start with you. You actually worked on this story.
Yes.
For those who don't understand, story number 1 is
a big deal.
Reporters die for story number 1.
That day I got
you had that.
Yes. I was lucky.
This week, because something obviously ticked them off.
Yeah.
And ticked them off, really badly for them to go after these two very important independent constitutional officers. So tell us about that report and what it said.
In fact, somebody said those two ladies in those offices are the last standing official opposition right now. I don't know how true that is. But yes, there was a report that was released by the Auditor General for the period 2023-2024. It was a big document, about 800 pages. But if you get to page 203 of the document, it talks about the procurement of healthcare information technology digitization system, And it says that this system cost 104,808,136,478. However, when the Office of the Auditor General reviewed the tender documents and the contract agreement and the financial proposal, there were some things she called unsatisfactory matters. I think there were 5 of them. One of them was what she called unbudgeted procurement, saying that during the year of the audit, the State Department initiated procurement for the provision of this system at a cost of 104 billion through what they call specially permitted procurement procedure. But it was not included in the procurement plan nor the medium-term budgetary expenditure framework. She talked about how this is contrary to Section 53(7) of the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act. And she says management breached the law. That is 1. 2, uncompetitive procurement. The system was procured through what I said, specially permitted procurement procedure, and talked about the section of the law that talked about it, but the process was contrary to another article of the law, which requires a fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective way of acquiring goods and services. And she said the law had been breached. And then she talked about something she said called undefined scope of work. So what exactly was this system supposed to do? It was supposed to have been installed in public health facilities. But the number of health facilities to be installed were not disclosed in the contract. And then in addition to that, there was something that was costed at 7 billion about training and customer education, but healthcare workers were supposed to be trained on the system, but there was really no details about what this training was to justify why it was going to cost 7 billion shillings. And then she explains how that was also a breach of the law. I think the doozy one was lack of payment arrangement agreement. According to the financial proposal, the consortium proposed the adoption of a funding model, which entails charging fees from member contributions for Social Health Authority (SHA), claims from health facilities, and charges for the track and trace solution at a rate of 2.5% for SHA, that's me and you, 5% for the health facilities, and 1.5% for the track and trace solution for 10 years. At the end of the 10 years, this system will have cost us 111 billion shillings. 7 billion shillings more. But what is more interesting is that this money was going to be transferred to an escrow daily or at a frequency of not less than a week. No more information was given about this escrow. And the Auditor General said that one of the issues she raises with this is that there was no public participation. People did not know what they are paying for, if they're actually paying for this. And she said that is another breach of the law. And the final one is what she called unfavorable contract clauses, which talk about how the State Department is not allowed to develop another system or a product with similar functionalities to compete with this system being procured, because even if it puts the government at risk, even if it gets outdated, even if anything happens to that system, they cannot procure a similar one. Another interesting one is that if there is any breach of this agreement, hakuna kwenda mahakama hapa Nairobi kusema tumelalamika. No. They're supposed to go to the London Court of International Arbitration. Those are some of the issues that came up. And I think this is what caused the hullabaloo we've seen.
And there was also about where the data, particularly for patients. And we know now we have the Office of the Data Commissioner that serves to protect data. And most importantly, like health data, which apparently is going to be, per the contract, owned by the entities and not the government of Kenya. And you've talked about escrow accounts and big words like those ones. Over to you, accountant.
Right.
Bigger words.
Right. So when the Auditor General gives such a report, and you can start to imagine why members of Parliament would be so aggrieved. First of all, I think when they are saying that, I think it's Rambo Juret who is saying that the report should not be, people should not be expressing themselves on the report before the House has processed it. The question we need to establish, and they need to tell us, because once you present a report to the House, which is ordinarily that's what the control of budget will do, that's what the Auditor General will do. Once you present it and it's tabled, it becomes a public document that anyone can make comment. So if this report has not been tabled, let them tell the country that indeed it has not been tabled, and therefore procedurally you are aggrieved, then we can deal with that. But as you do that, let's deal with the content, because does it change whether it's taken through the process or not? Because I think I didn't see a press conference of the Auditor General calling the members of the press, telling them that this is the report and these are the issues.
Because where did we in fact get the report?
We got it from the website of the Auditor General office itself. And you download it, you start to consume, and you can make inferences, interpretations of what you're finding. Exactly. On this particular matter of the Social Health Authority or the Universal Health Coverage, which is the system that Jamila is describing here, remember not long ago, members of Parliament have been expressing themselves. Not last year, 2025. Just before Parliament resumed in the month of February, they were in Naivasha, in a retreat, and they raised a lot of questions. They were aggrieved with how the Social Health Authority or the universal health coverage is being implemented in the country. Part of the questions that were being raised is how did you arrive at the cost of 104 billion shillings for a system that is being built by a consortium of 3 companies. What are you paying for exactly? They ask those questions.
The same questions
the
that the
Auditor General is explaining in a more programmatic manner of what exactly she was able to identify. And she has looked at the contract. I remember having a conversation early in the week with panelists here in studio who were doubting the veracity of what the Auditor General has been able to find. But when you ask them, have you seen the contract? They haven't. So the Auditor General has seen the contract, and she's empowered by the Constitution. I'll be getting that particular clause or article, which is Article 229, which empowers the auditor to do whatever she's doing. And it is within 6 months after the end of each financial year, the Auditor General shall audit and report in respect of that financial year on different issues, including accounts of the national and county governments, the accounts of all funds and authorities of the national and county governments, on all accounts of all courts. So it's not just about what the executive is doing. Also the accounts of the National Assembly, the Senate and the county assemblies, the accounts of political parties funded from public funds, the public debt, and the accounts of any other entity that legislation requires the Auditor General to do so. And once the office is able to do that, so the audit report shall be submitted to Parliament or the relevant county assembly. What should happen is within 3 months, after receiving an audit report, Parliament or the county assembly shall debate and consider the report and take appropriate action. So debate and consider, leader of minority is saying that we'll receive that report and verify the facts in the report. If you've gone through the training of auditing or accounting, if you like, there's the work of the auditor. And whatever they find, yes, in our framework, you want the people's representatives to understand, because they're the ones who draw the budgets. They're the ones who pass the budgets. So they pass and say that this much is going to be spent on this particular project or this particular program. The auditor comes in after the financial year to check whatever was planned to be done. First, has it been done? So the control of budget is going to follow the process as you implement the budget. But the Auditor General is looking at the value for money. If you say that you're going to build a road, let's say from Mandera to Isiolo, for instance, was it done? How much money was spent? What was the procurement process? Was it value for money?
Were there delays in construction that cost?
Were there variations? And then you report to the House. The House is supposed now to take corrective or the appropriate action, whether to recommend prosecution or to say, actually, this was done correctly as per the auditor's report, and these are the required actions that should be taken. Now, outside that is to overimagine what the role of Parliament should be. And it's a very short period of 3 months. The question is, what has Parliament been doing with previous audit reports?
Because that's where I was going to. In fact, considering the fact that when she was before the Senate committee, she did speak about the fact that the reports are really bulky, because there's obviously issues that have been unresolved from previous financial years that then have an effect on the financial year that is under audit or scrutiny at the time. And there was even the question about whether the reports are too bulky, whether they should make them smaller, whether you should add those unresolved issues as an addendum or make it part of the bigger report. But, here we are, Jay, with the issues around the process, with the issues around, it would seem, now we are singling out and demonizing individuals, because let's remind people that it is the Office of the Auditor General. Nancy Gathungu may be the Auditor General, but there is a whole team of auditors that sit in that Office of the Auditor General, which is one of those independent constitutional commissions. Same with the Controller of Budget. The person may be at the helm, but surely there's a whole, office of a team that does it and puts these reports together. And there is a process that, the audit goes through. They come to you and say, give us the following reports. We're looking for, the audit on this. We're looking for the accounts on this. And we've seen that even with county governments. And then this is the process, right? And then the person in question would then provide the documents. They would go through them. Sometimes the documents are insufficient. The auditor will ask for more or more, proof of, was there a signature here? Who procured this? Who was the right person to have signed off on these payments? And this is a back and forth process. It's not them sitting in a corner in a pigeonhole somewhere and they come up with these things. So there is a whole process to this, and it is a timeline as well, right?
True, Yvonne. And actually what the law says is that by the end of September 30th of every year, that is estimated to be 3 months after the end of a financial year, every government entity must submit to the audit process. And how this happens is, first of all, you submit your financial reports as required by law. Once that has been done, then there's what is called the entrance meeting. So in the entrance meeting, the auditor or the officers in the audit office sit and engage with the officers of the entity to be audited. So you sort of set up a framework of agreement or working. Then you will raise some questions. Then after that, the audit office team goes to the field to do verification. And that is why some say sometimes they'll go and ask you, you said this road was supposed to be 30 millimeters. Why is it 26? What happened to the 4 millimeters? So they go to the field, and there's constant engagement between the audit office and the entity to be audited. After that, then they also have what we call the exit meeting, that after they've collected all the reports, then they once again sit again with this team and tell them, based on what you provided us, based on the verifications we've done, these are our findings. And after that findings, a letter is then written to the management of that entity, telling them that we did our report, and these are some of the gaps we found. These are some of the queries we have. Kindly respond to them. And a time frame is given. Once that time frame has been exhausted, then the auditor now does the final report. it is this report that is then submitted to the National Assembly. It is interesting that some of our members of parliament who I thought would understand how these operate are basically laying questions that ideally the entities that are supposed to be edited would answer at the initial stages, not at the parliamentary stage.
Yeah.
Looks like clearly they're doing a bidding for somebody else, especially on the SHA issue. Like some rightfully says, sometime in January, they sat somewhere in Naivasha and they put to task the PS Harry Kimutai, I think?
Yeah. Health.
Yes, of health. It was a near shouting match because they were telling them this thing, one, we don't understand it, it doesn't work and whatnot. But now, less than 60 days later.
So are they the only ones who are allowed to raise question? Correct me if I'm wrong, weren't there a group of others who said, you know, who admitted to not knowing the contents of the 3 laws surrounding the Social Health Authority? So, you know, it would be interesting if they're asking for this report to be brought back to them, yet there's a good number of them, or at least a number, that didn't know what they were signing. So what will they be oversighting and what sort of reports will they be looking at? But, you know, just to cap what you were talking about with respect to the process and then, of course, the eventual finding, I want us to listen to the Auditor General, Nancy Gathungu, now giving her findings about the Social Health Authority.
I have concluded that there was no effectiveness or lawfulness in the use of public resources under those matters. Internal controls are not being followed. The governance structure has problems. There is no risk management, and hence, then we have all these issues happening.
So this is a qualified accounting report. Linus, with everything we've seen, it's a proper audit process. Now has been subjected to quite some politicization on the floor of the House today.
That's right, and this is actually the irony of it all, that in Parliament, the Auditor General, and let me add the Controller of Budget, should find a very close ally in the protection of the governance systems and provisions of the Constitution. But there is a sense in which our country is governed by political mood swings, where you find people expressing themselves and taking positions depending on their political affiliation of the time. I'm just imagining if this report had been tabled or leaked or released before broad-based 2022, 2023, how will that parliament have sounded today? Very, very different. Just release the same text. Don't change anything. Just at a different time. Remove broad-based, and you will find quite a number of those people that spoke today sounding completely different from how they sounded today. The Auditor General actually reports to Parliament. And when you look at how the Constitution really intended, and this is just my own interpretation, it intended to facilitate Parliament in pushing for accountability. Because members of Parliament are not experts. In fact, some of them are suspects of corruption. They come in, they get elected. Now you get offices where the professionals, like accountants, sit, like the office of the Auditor General. You can pick that report as a member of Parliament of different background. Maybe you are a journalist before you became elected. Maybe you are a preacher. Maybe you were just somebody that this is the first job you're doing. These are facilitative officers in helping you understand what goes on. Because look, SHA is very complex. Just like that Parliament itself found out. Bonyo was talking about the meeting in Naivasha. Because there's a gap between our politics and the substance. So they finally read the law only later. which is the ostrich approach to. Yes, they say that the memory of an ostrich is normally on delayed mode, so they can see you now, but record that for Tuesday next week. Which is what happened in Naivasha. That oh my, is that what the three laws are talking about? So we are paying a very high price for what I'm calling political mood swings. Members of Parliament are not settled to discuss substance for its own merit. Yeah. Why don't you just discuss the merit of the report? Of the report. Why bring in politics? We saw elsewhere, some trying to suggest in the name of in the case of the control of budget, where she comes from. Yeah. And that's how it goes down. But there is one thing we must continuously celebrate at all times. It is this Constitution. Yeah. The way Article 229, 228 are written. They are written for posterity. And it serves the country well when all those that are stakeholders in the process of protecting the Constitution actually play their role. In terms of the Office of the Auditor General, I remember as a young reporter, they do a very difficult job. I came to the newsroom during the era of President Moi, and there used to be an Auditor General by the name DG Njoroge. DG, I never found out what DG stands for, but DG Njoroge was very famous for releasing reports that sound exactly like this. Because this is what accountants of integrity are supposed to do. Just show how the public money is being spent. And in fact, also in the case of private auditing, that's what it's supposed to do. Yeah. Just give the report and step back. Yes. And that's what Gathungu has done. She's done a report. Now we are discussing the other things, and we are contesting the content. Again, an auditor's report sometimes works like a signpost. If the arrow is pointing that way, it doesn't matter how much you argue, you can't turn the arrow. And I'm just waiting to see how long it'll take. Yeah, but Linus, just to buttress the point about how, there's a political mood in the air, because what we saw on the floor of the House today actually started with the President, who came out in full defense. Now, we know where we are, like you said, with the broad-based issue. And that was interesting to see both the Leader of Minority and Leader of Majority singing the same tune. Yeah. Like I've said here before, holding hands and singing Kumbaya. And that holding hands and the singing actually started with the head of state. Let's listen to him defending the Social Health Authority.
Kwa sababu it is the biggest program tuko nayo kwa taifa la Kenya, pengine itachukua muda ishike laini. Lakini believe you me, it is going to work. Believe you me.
And I guess the closest the President came to actually speaking to the contents of the report and the specific issues that have been raised around the Social Health Authority and particularly the work of the consortium, he actually then took full ownership of that consortium and how it came about.
Fanya consortium kubwa. Tukasema we are going to have a consortium of technology companies that is going to make sure that there are no fraudulent claims in SHA.
And he didn't stop there. He went on to explain about who is going to pay for that system.
Going to make sure that that system will not be paid for by the government of Kenya. It will be a fee-for-service facility that will make sure that we protect citizens' contribution. The people who are complaining are the fellows who have been stealing from us. They don't want a technology system that works because they want to continue stealing from us. I want to tell them the stealing is over, my friends. Move on.
Now, I'm not one to gag, and, you know, freedom of speech and freedom of thought is fully allowed in this country. But it's a rather interesting way that you see the head of state and members of National Assembly, particularly at the head of leadership, right? So we've got the head of the executive, and we've got the two, you know, leader majority and leader minority, who are all responding to this and in a similar manner, which is, rather than go into detail and explain, it's, you know, throw mud here and there and confuse and say, okay, this is about the people who want to corrupt the system like they did NHIF. That's all well and good, and that's a valid defense. But I mean, when you take a look at the Auditor General's report, which was, but when you signed this, what did that mean? But when you're going to pay this, where will that money come from? But then this, there was no transparency in the signing of this, questioning even where arbitration would be done in the event of a dispute. I mean, you know, it went point by point and very detailed. Now, I get that, you know, these are two different platforms. You know, one is audit, and that's serious business, and another is politics, where anything goes.
And I think I found it interesting, Yvonne, that suddenly these members of parliament were defending governors. They became the governor's biggest defenders. They are talking about how, oh, they're struggling, they're unable to run business in the county because the control of budget is not giving them any money, that they have to ask her for every little thing that they need to do. In fact, that office has to be bribed for them to get any money to be able to implement projects. These are the same governors who have left money lying in the central bank. There was a report that was released by the control of budget for the half year 2025, showing that governors have starved their counties of much-needed development with billions that are still lying in the accounts of the central bank. And she talked, I think, about, was it Baringo, that had 5% of only spent...
Unusual
and very, very little amount of money that has been spent on development. These are the same governors who wamekosa pesa, that they're wananyimwa, and they're the same ones who are not spending the money. I think, Yvonne, as Lina said, the framers of the Constitution knew how sensitive these offices were because of the work that they're going to do. They're going to question the executive, they're going to question how things were done. They're going to question counties. That's why these offices are independent offices. Article 228 and 229 talks about these two offices, the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget. That's why kuwatoa sio rahisi. It's a whole process. You have to prove all sorts of things. Bankruptcy, mental issues, umeiba, umefanya nini, because of the job that they do. And they need to do it this way, Yvonne. Because I was hearing one of the members of parliament saying that them releasing this report to the public ni makosa kubwa sana. But then, how else would we know such things? Let's say in parliament walikuwa na hiyo majukumu ya release these reports. You may not even see them.
Reports that they say they need to verify and perhaps before, have a chance at all.
They're actually required by the Constitution to release, make those reports public.
Correct.
You know, it's interesting that, and I don't know where this leaves this entire process, because the Auditor General has spoken. Questions have been raised by the Senate committee. I think it's on the one chaired by Senator Moses Kajwang. And Nancy Gathungu has appeared before it and made her comments. Then the president comes out and owns the process. Nimefanya consortium kubwa. Remember, the main question, one of the main questions that the auditors are asking is that the procurement process was uncompetitive. And I know there has been argument that the especially permitted procurement procedure is within the law. Indeed it is. But then again, the Auditor General is citing Article 227, subarticle 1, which requires fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective ways of acquiring goods and services. Up there, she also raises questions about this sort of procurement not being budgeted for. And for the simple reason that it runs for across 10 years, it needs to have been part of the medium-term planning of the country. So she's raising pertinent questions. They require answers if the user department is to come forth and give that information. And I recall that as soon as this conversation started back in October, around that time, there were questions that were posed to the Principal Secretary at the Department of Medical Services, because he's the accounting officer. The communication that came from the Ministry of Health was actually signed off by the Principal Secretary, Harry Kimtai. There are questions that were asked about how they identified this particular consortium. There were questions that were asked about the value of this contract of 104 billion shillings. And I remember even members of parliament, they made a very famous trip to Mombasa because they had raised a lot of questions in Nairobi. So they went to Mombasa, they were briefed by the Minister of Health, and they came out of that meeting saying that they have given this process a clean bill of health. So was it supposed to end there? So the auditors have come out and given this indication. When the president says that nimefanya consortium kubwa, so where do we go? Do you summon the president to come and explain? Or is he saying Nime, meaning the cabinet or the government, or is it himself? I don't know where this will go. But at the same time, even as you raise all these questions, remember that not long ago, we had reports of the Auditor General on the implementation of the NGCDF in different constituencies.
Yes.
The auditor's report is supposed to go to Parliament. Yeah. There's a committee called Special Funds Committee.
Yes.
And it's just about to have a new chairperson. I think the chairperson will come from the ODM party this time round. Yeah. I'll get the name. I think it's Mheshimiwa Fatma that is supposed to be chairing that committee should the elections go that way. But what has happened to, what does Parliament do with reports on NGCDF, by the way? All these reports that we hear about the implementation of NGCDF projects, bursaries, questions being raised, what does Parliament do with those reports? As you find that answer, so what are you expecting to happen to this particular report by the Auditor General?
Yes.
And I wanted to raise another point about what the questions that the House is raising, or the leadership of the House is raising about corrupt control of budget. And I've heard that before from other governors, including the governor of Kakamega, Fernandez Baraza. He appeared on Daybreak sometime and he said as much, that especially officers of the control of budget in the counties are fond of such, and actually the officers of the county have to come to Nairobi to make those cases. That's his claim. It has never been verified. It has never been reported to EACC. Action, we have not heard of action being taken.
What if the reverse is actually the case, where people try to get a favorable, what do you call it, Kanyagio story? Yeah.
I just wanted to read an excerpt of the Constitution, Article 228. And Sub-Article 4 says, the control of budget shall oversee the implementation of the budgets of the national and county government by authorizing withdrawals from public funds under Articles 204, 206, and 207. It also says the controller shall not approve any withdrawal from a public fund unless satisfied that the withdrawal is authorized by law. Unless satisfied. It is the office to be satisfied. It is not the member of parliament. It is not the county governor to be satisfied. It is on her office. She took an oath to do exactly that. It also says that every 4 months, the controller shall submit to each House of Parliament a report on the implementation of the budgets of the national and county governments. Because this has been happening, there has been reports on the implementation of the budget by the national government. Every 3 months, the reports are taken to Parliament. So you have the first quarter, the second quarter, meaning half year, the third quarter, and eventually the full year. What does Parliament do with it? What does the Senate do with it? What does the National Assembly do with it? So that they can come and claim that there's corruption being happening here.
And if indeed there is that corruption, there is a way to deal with that matter. But I suppose saying it on the floor of the House, where does that still apply? You know, you've got immunity and you can say, you know, what you wish is rather disingenuous and rather naughty, to be honest. But, you know, those are the issues that are coming out. And by the way, they're so angered by what we see from the Social Health Authority, but let's remind people that this report spoke about so many other aspects of government. What is happening in Treasury? What is happening with the Hustler Fund? What's happening with housing? I mean, we did a report even in business in terms of variation of contracts and what is happening, delays that are costing that. But in all our reporting then, the anger also moved not just to the Controller of Budget or the Office of the Auditor General. I mean, they were not done. Clearly, you know, they're a very angry lot tonight, because now, when they were done with those two independent officers, they turned their guns on the media. Again, from the entire leadership of the House, the majority leader, minority leader, and the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Kenya. Watch.
What is happening nowadays in our country in the sphere of media, Mr. Speaker, is shocking. Nowadays you'll wake up to headlines that are saying, stupid man, useless man. Mr. Speaker, what kind of media is that? Where is the Media Council of Kenya that's supposed to regulate the media? Where is, if people are aggrieved on what media is doing, where do you complain to, Mr. Speaker? And there are no apologies. They will move on. They can write anything today, tomorrow they will write another one, Mr. Speaker, and nothing happens.
It is my plea that in reporting business that is before the House, and it's my plea to our very good journalists in the Fourth Estate, when you are reporting business before the House, please report accurately, maintain the highest levels of journalism standards with accuracy, and restrain from having sensational stories that are only geared towards inciting members of the public or selling your otherwise slow-moving newspapers.
We can see that there is indiscipline in the fourth estate, and we have allowed that indiscipline because there are no consequences for misreporting and misinformation at all. We must begin to put pressure on them. One, if those who are within the Bunge grounds, who are accredited to report here in Bunge, misreport, then the accreditation must be taken. And not just the individual accreditation, that of their media house. It's as simple as that. Also, we must ensure that there is legal consequences. Every time they misreport, if they misreport the Auditor General should sue them. If they misreport Parliament, we should be able to sue those media houses until they begin to know that we are not going to allow it.
Okay, I haven't yet had a complaint from the Office of the Auditor General, but then again, it's 2025 and we have statements like we must begin to put pressure on them and that they're indisciplined. That is the sort of talk you spare for a child, Jay.
Interesting.
And last I checked,
most journalists are
we're all above age.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. I think just like we've seen on the Social Health Authority issue, this has been the talking point. On Tuesday at the burial of the late Malava MP in Jendi Malulu, that is where it all started. Attack the media and blame the media for everything that is wrong with this administration. And it's sad that some members of parliament are starting to personalize the National Assembly, that they speak as if they own the National Assembly, what is said in there and what actions goes in there. Unfortunately, to them, they need to understand that the media does not owe them a positive story. We just owe them a factual story. That is it. And reporting on the Auditor's General report is a factual reporting. We are stating things that the Auditor General has raised. If you don't like what the Auditor General has raised, then make good at the point of handling public resources. Because these officers that the Auditor General says did not submit some of these reports or the faults that they found are a creation of this same house. If you look at that Health Authority thing, the problem started with this National Assembly. They could not ask the right questions. They passed a law that they were unaware of. So when we ultimately report on it, then they want to lay the blame on us. They want to gag us. They want to tell us, I mean, speak to us as if we are children. No.
You've been a naughty boy, Jay. You've been
Chapaye.
Chapaye.
They've not had the last of us. That is the promise we are giving them.
Linus, as you come in, I think the one thing for me is to not be distracted, because this seems like a distraction tactic. Rather than answer the questions specifically that have been raised, you go around and, you know, more noise, is it more heat than light? Sure. And you raise this and you, attack the individual. Let's not lose sight of that report. I know it is 800 pages, but there is interesting tidbits out there. Like we said, if you think Shah is just, that's really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to it. But this is a well-known tactic in the world of politics. Make a lot of noise, divert attention away from the real issues, that then takes attention and focus away from what the issues that are being scrutinized really are. Linus, as we close this topic.
Look, the media will always come under this kind of attacks. It's very normal. It's part of the environment. That's what happens. But a few things must be clear. One of them is when it comes to an Auditor General's report, the media has no hand in writing it, and the media has absolutely no hand in implementing it. It can only report what contents they are. But you know, there was very interesting suggestions there, even from Gladys, who sat here, about the fourth estate becoming indisciplined, inaccurate, and all that. Let's take this out of the show for a moment. Okay. And one thing we should wish for is an audit, institutional audit of media versus parliament. And let's see which of the two institutions has been growing for the last few years, has experienced a positive growth spurt. You know, and then we got head-to-head. Jamila Mohammed versus Khadija Ali. Yeah, compare. Is it growth? Is Khadija Ali proud of Jamila Mohammed? Is Chelagat Mutai proud of Sholay, Gladys Boss Sholay? You know, in terms of what Parliament is supposed to do. I think that's one audit that we should really welcome. Let's audit these institutions, because I hold it so firmly that there's been so much tremendous growth in the Kenyan media space. We have, not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of the role of holding public institutions to account, the role of holding those in power to account. And even just as a mere employer of, as an industry, there's been so much growth that was not demonstrated in the views of those members of Parliament. And of course, the headlines they're complaining about, that is actually a very serious growth spurt, because media also tells you as it is. It's a mirror. Mm-hmm. I know there's some headlines that have been found disturbing. Actually, what we should worry is whether those headlines are inaccurate. If they are inaccurate, yes, that calls for for discipline. But if they are accurate, however brutal some of them have been, deal with it.
And our role to Kenyans, our duty to Kenyans. This is one of the main reasons why we do it. Because if we didn't, who would?
You know, Yvonne, there's a statement every member of Parliament read when they went to Parliament the first time for this current term. It's called the Oath of Office. And they said, having been elected a member of the Senate or National Assembly, I do swear that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the people and the Republic of Kenya, that I will obey, respect, uphold, preserve, protect, and defend this Constitution of the Republic of Kenya, and that I will faithfully and you know that word, yeah?
Yes. That
Go
one.
for it.
Conscientiously discharge the duties of a member of Parliament.
Okay. Well done, Sam.
So the Constitution is to be defended.
Yes.
The whole of it.
Yes. Yeah. Not bits and pieces.
Article 34 of the Constitution, freedom of the media. I'll read 2B. The state shall not penalize any person for any opinion or view or the content of any broadcast, publication, or dissemination. The state shall not exercise control over or interfere with any person engaged in broadcasting, the production or circulation of any publication, or the dissemination of information by any medium. Sub-Article 3 says, broadcasting and other electronic media have freedom of establishment, subject only to licensing procedures that are necessary to regulate the airwaves. And then it says that all state-owned media shall be free to determine independently the editorial content of their broadcast or other communications. If you go back to Article 34, 3B, broadcasting and other electronic media have freedom of establishment subject only to licensing procedures that are independent of control by government, political interests, or commercial interests. So politicians, members of Parliament have no place. They have no role in determining what content is carried by electronic media, print media, or whichever media.
Okay.
The one thing really which they can take home is the freedom to criticize us as media. There is absolutely no problem, and there is nothing wrong in expressing an opinion about how the media is covering you. And some of the things Gladys was saying there were also accurate, that you can sue in case you are
aggrieved or offended.
Aggrieved in a way that harms your reputation. All that is okay. What is not okay was that suggestion that because you may not like some coverage, then you can lock out some reporters or media houses from Parliament. Parliament is a public institution. It's not a private property.
Let's see what they'll think about the headline in the Standard tomorrow. Let's take a break. It doesn't look good. Let's take a break. When we come back, we talk about gifts. I mean, clearly, some people like them, some people don't. Some people are accepting them, other people not so much. We'll talk about that when we come back. It's the gift of giving, it's the art of giving. 'Tis the season. We'll be right back with that and more.